Well, there we go. Almost smooth. Hardly even 5 watt live material. That was so smooth. Hey, everybody. How you doing? It's Keith Williams, of course. We are 5 watt live. This 5 watt live, this was a little confusion this week with the last video came out. This 5 watt live is brought to you with the support of TrueFire's sister company, ArtistWorks. ArtistWorks. I want to do a little spot for ArtistWorks in the middle of the stream. More about those good folks later on in the stream. I think I have Mr. Childs here. I think that he took a course that I took there. He's in the green room. He's making faces and trying to mess me up, which is, as we know, is not that difficult. BB Ninja is here moderating for us today. As you all know, there is no one better than BB, and I'm honored to have him here. Let's photobomb him in. Boom. There we go. That's BB. That's the photo I am authorized to use. There we go. Watch for his answers in the questions to your questions in the chat. If you have a question or a comment that you need to be shared with everybody, please put an @5wattworld in front of it, and I will. I'll test my limits of technology and try to put it up on the screen so we can talk about it. I'm currently working on a history of Brian May's Red Special guitar. I'm working on that script. Angus Clark, who did the music for the Tony Iommi video, is pulling the music together as he spent years in a Queen cover band. He's very qualified to emulate those tones. Has a Brian May Burns guitar or two, and certainly the AC30 tones, etc. He took a lot of grief from people, I dare I say, less knowledgeable than him about Tony Iommi tones. So I think he's told me that he is prepared for the lambasting that he will get from the experts about Brian May. Remember, if you want to support me and the channel, there are links for t-shirts, hoodies, and Stomp preset packs in the description. If you don't need another t-shirt, there's simply a PayPal tip jar there as well. There's also a link to the Friends of 5 Watt on Patreon in the description, where you can get early access to videos, and you have a direct link to me via the messaging there. I'm delighted to get notes from the folks that are in Friends of 5 Watt. And so I'm in there all the time. If you're here but you're not subscribed, go down and click that subscribe button right now and don't miss another episode or live stream. Alt Grendel, who is a regular here, already told y'all to be clicking the like button, preemptively, because we're going to be amazing today. Very funny. Every time I post a pic of any amp in my Instagram feed, I get questions about the best overall amp, what it is. What's the best overall amp? And I've been playing guitar since I was 15. So since 1975, 14, it's 1974. Yeah, it's a while. So I've had a few amps, and the first amp I ever had, as I've said here before, was a non-reverb Princeton. And then, but I'm currently testing a Princeton Tone Master. This is my current living room rig. Let me get me. So on the right is a Princeton Tone Master that's been recabbed for a 12-inch speaker by the good people at Mojo Tone. And on the left is an amp that I built with Dan Lurie's design and assistance. And when I say assistance, what I mean is after I built it, he made it run, of a Gibson a 1958 Gibson GA40. Thanks, Grundle. I'm laughing at Zach. He's doing a good job of distracting me. Let me get this out of here. So, since Zach and I both made videos about our love for the Deluxes, and since Zach has currently started using a Headstrong Princeton-sized amp, I thought now would be a good time to do the pros and cons of the Deluxe versus Princeton as an amp at home and on the stage. We will be relying on Zach for the on-the-stage part of this program, to be sure. We'll approach this in broad categories. We're going to do playing at home, playing on stage. We're going to do a quick review of the stats as we come to each one. If that's cool with everybody. I'm looking for at 5 Watt Worlds over here. What do we got? Ridiculous Wong says, I want to know if Zach still loves his blonde tone master. Yeah, we're going to talk about that, I'm sure. And then Christopher Bell says, it's actually a great subject that I didn't know I needed to hear. Well, that's exactly what we're trying to do, Christopher. We're trying to always guess the things that you need to know in advance of you knowing that you need to know. All right, so let's get Zach on the screen and throw caution to the wind. There we go. Oh, I muted you.
I mean, hello, good folks.
I
was just moving my mouth earlier for fun.
You. That's right. This is the good thing about. It's the only good thing about having to do all the tech on this end is that if I disagree with you,
you can always mute me. Yeah, it's easy.
We'll put you in the timeout box. There you go.
I've been there before.
I told Zach I have to turn the lights on a cooler setting when I have him on because I'm always laughing so much my face is all red. So I have to turn it down. Look. I told him it's to give the illusion of having blood under the skin. All right. I was thinking, Zach. I mentioned this to Zach, but the idea here is that we're going to rate the amps on a scale of 1 to 5, 5 being the highest score, in a few different categories. We're going to do, and I think I added them since I sent this to you. Typical that I would change it up, change the exam after I send you the test questions. I think it'll just give us a way to get through it. I think it's already 4:08, and there's a ton of things to talk about. And somebody already put in the stream, they wanted us to touch on what a Princeton chorus, and I assume they mean a red knob Princeton chorus.
Yeah.
In the short version, that's a solid state amp from the 80s.
Yes, it's from probably around 89 or 90. So really, it was something the new, the post CBS, when they started making amps and they really didn't have a full lineup, and they started making the Princeton chorus because it was chorus was king, and also an amp that had chorus in it. And
actually they're very cool. I owned one, and when my nephew needed something that was loud and dependable and cheap, I said, go find a Princeton chorus and light. I mean, they're incredibly light.
They're very light. Yeah.
Christopher Butler was reminding me that I got his name wrong already. So it is 5 Watt Live. When I start making mistakes right out of the box, then we're good. Right?
Yeah. It's live.
Yeah. Jeff Raddick says hi from Boise. We had a lot of folks on here from different places. Sam Stamos is digging your schematic shirt.
Thank you.
Sam probably has a full wardrobe of Ask Zach schematic shirts.
Well, I hope so.
What's better? What's better than that?
Exactly. I try to, do something good. Yeah.
I think that it's the Itchy Bretta.
Yes.
Ahoy, Zach Keefe. Possible to compare the Princeton versus Deluxe Tone Masters. We're going to go right there right now. So let's get started. So I'll try to keep track of the scores as we go. And if it doesn't get too contentious, I might even put them in the description after the stream's over. If it gets ugly, if people start getting mean and stuff in there, I won't put them up. But if everybody's nice, then we'll put them up. If BV has to bounce anybody, you know what I'm saying? Y'all know who you are.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. So there's currently 4 layers. I actually had 3, then I realized the 68s were in there too. And I'm going to do these in price. We're going to do them in price order from least expensive to currently most expensive. So they go Tone Masters, 68 reissues, I was interested to see that the 68 reissues are $100 less than the 65 reissues across the board. Interesting. 65 reissues and then the 64 hand wireds. Those are the categories.
Yep.
That list, of course, doesn't include some cool variants that you see from the factory every once in a while. Sweetwater always seems to have something, a Princeton with a 12-inch speaker, and those are really cool and usually, not that much more. So if we have time, we'll touch on those as we go through it. And also, if we have time, we'll spend a little minute talking about, like I already touched on the fact that I have a GA40 in a Princeton size cab. And Zac, as I said on the outset, has been playing a Headstrong, which put me in mind to drag him onto the stream to do this today. Okay.
Ready.
He's ready.
I'm ready.
Ready to rank. Okay. So I'm going to blow through the stats on each as we go. The Princeton Tone Master is a list set for $899. It's a 12 watts amp, but it is a solid state, a digitally emulating the original tube circuit. That's actually a 50 watts Class D power amp. I don't know if I need to go through all the dimensions, but I will say it's interesting that they're slightly different. That the Tone Master is 16 high by 18 wide, 18.3 wide, and 8 1/3 deep. It weighs, with the solid pine cabinet, the Tone Master's is 19.9. So I think we can say 20 pounds. And interestingly, the Princeton Tone Master does not have a Neo speaker in it. Yeah. Has a 10-inch speaker, 10-inch Alnico speaker. So have you spent time with one of these, Zac?
I have.
Oh, you have?
So, yeah. Okay. So recently I had a friend of mine that let me borrow the Tone Master Princeton. And yeah, it has the C10R speaker, which is a ceramic low wattage 10-inch speaker, and I'm going to give it like a 3
for stage volume or overall score, and you're done.
Just over. That's kind of my overall, and so that's my overall score. And this is
just I just paste a 3 for all categories.
Yeah, 3. Okay. So it's a cool little amp. It obviously it has the look. It looks like a blackface Princeton REVERB.
Yep.
Yeah. The problem is that it really doesn't sound like a blackface Princeton REVERB. And so it's much more hi-fi sounding. Now, is it a good sound? Yes, it's a very good usable sound. So yeah. I'm not saying it doesn't sound good. And is it usable? Yes, it's usable. You could use it. It works well. I think I'm kind of you're going to have issues with me. I mean, let's just put the cards on the table. I mean, you're going to have issues with me, with reissue stuff. I like it, but it's one of those things that you have to realize. It's like this is something that looks like an amp that was made by a company that doesn't exist anymore.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah. So,
and you're going to make something look like a thing. Don't be surprised if I compare it to that thing.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So do I think they're not good tools? No. I think all of the amps that we're going to talk about are great tools. None of them are stinkers. And there's one of them out of the bunch that's my favorite and that I still own, of these, current production models.
And I think somebody already asked about it. We'll come back to it. We're going to get there. Yeah. So you're going to give it a 3. I haven't used it on stage, so I'm going to have to abstain.
Yeah. I haven't used it on stage either. I've only used it here at the house.
Although I have to say, because in the Tone Master category in general, because of the IR out, and the ability, it does have clean headroom. The thing does sound clean. And the way I'm using it in the living room is in a wet dry rig where I use it as the wet amp with my GA40. Sounds great. And it actually takes dirt well too.
Yeah.
So
and
it does what it's supposed to do, even if it doesn't sound like a 65 Princeton.
Yeah. And it works really well as that's one of the things about those amps is it works really well as a stereo amp where you use it along with another amp, with a Princeton or a tube Princeton or something like that. And actually does really well because it fill outs frequencies that the other amp doesn't have. Right. It's actually what makes it not like the original, makes it a really good complement to the original.
Yeah, it's kind of like the Hot Rod series amps, in the same kind of way. It's good for
yeah.
Yeah. All right. So I would say I can't do stage volume. Home volume, it's great. I find it great. The fact that the Tone Masters can, virtually dial down the wattage and break up and give you edge of break at whatever room volume, you and your family can agree upon is great. So you're sticking with your 3 for home volume, right? Okay.
Yeah.
And then portability, you got to kind of give it a better score for portability.
Yeah,
right?
yeah. I have to give it a 5 for portability.
I agree. So I had this picture. Let me go back here. So this picture, here it is in that Mojo Tone cab. This is like the original cab in that it's solid pine, but it has a 12-inch. I put the 12-inch Neo that came out of one of my deluxe Tone Masters at one point, and in that livery, that amp weighs all of 21 pounds with a 12-inch Neo speaker. So you can, and then of course it's quite a bit. It's moving quite a bit more air. And when we come to the next category, which was fullness, it's a much fuller sounding in the room amp than it was with the 10-inch original speaker.
Yeah, the Tone Master Princeton Reverb is held back by its speaker, and this is purely my opinion.
Yeah,
but I think that if you put a different 10-inch speaker in it, it will sound better. I am not a fan of the C10R speaker. I understand why they put it in there. And it's not that it's a bad sounding speaker, but to me, it's too papery sounding, and it just doesn't have enough fullness to it. And if you swap speakers out, whether it's a Neo or not, or an Alnico or ceramic, whatever you want to do, I think you get more out of that amp.
David Barber, when we had him on the stream I guess it's a month ago now, David was raving, maybe when we weren't on the air yet, he was raving to me about the Raging Cajun 10-inch. He basically thinks that you put that in a Princeton and you don't have to do the whole 12-inch swap. He's a huge fan of that speaker.
I'm a big fan of the Celestian Greenback 10, and it really does a similar thing to the Raging Cajun, where it all of a sudden you put it in there and you're kind of fooled into thinking there's a 12 in there.
Right. Yeah. All right. So in the fullness category, you're going to stick with 3, or do you like 2.5?
I'm going to stick with, yeah, I'll say 2.5. Yeah.
I gotta write some of these down as I go.
I really don't like the C10R.
And then feel,
I'm going to give it like a 2.
Ooh, we're averaging
it's too high 5 for me.
I have to admit that I didn't spend as much time with it because I knew I was going to get the matching cabs.
Right.
And I'll give the guys at Mojo Tone a serious plug here. Yeah. The chassis on the original vintage size chassis are 1/8 inch narrower than a modern chassis for a Princeton. Did you know that?
No, I didn't.
So I'm reaching out to Andrew at Mojo Tone, and I said, I built this in one of your chassis, your vintage Princeton chassis years ago. He goes, yeah, I need you to go measure the chassis because I don't know if it's the vintage size or the other. We make both. And he was absolutely correct. And it would have had frankly, my old one had a little 1-inch gap in the faceplate. And now the new one's just fits perfectly. So
on the subject of cabs, they make a huge difference.
Yeah.
And so, the Tone Master cabs, which are solid pine, and they're really resonant, but also they're a little bit bright. Okay. Mm-hmm. And so they're resonant, they're bright, they have a tack to them like an old tweed cab and such. And so they sound brighter than an old Fender amp, because, they're heavier and who knows what else is going on, but there's more brightness in that cabinet. And so I think the Tone Masters kind of benefit from a darker speaker.
That's a really good point. All right. Yeah. So now Tone Master Deluxe, which the black version is $949, and the blonde one's $999.
Yeah.
And is that the one that you were tipping
the blonde
about?
Yeah. So my I don't want to, I don't want to give everything away, but the blonde Tone Master, in my opinion, is a really great amp. Is it exactly the same as a vintage deluxe reverb? No, it's not. But it's so usable in every sense of the word. Right. It's light. I mean, I would give it a 5 on everything. I would give it a 5.
I was going to do the same thing too. I just think it's extraordinary. And frankly, for the money, so I get people, and that's one of the reasons I pulled all these stats. I pulled them off the Sweetwater page today. The people will say, well, it's almost as much as the tube one. And as we're about to see in a minute, it's not almost as much as the tube one. It's a major percentage less. And, and people are like, well, it might not run forever. Well, I've worked on a lot of tube amps over the years. They don't run forever without attention. And I have to say that at $9.99 or used, I bought one of my black ones for $700 shipped, I think. When they first came out, they were a little less, retail. It's the price of 2 really good boutique pedals. It's like, do you expect your pedals to run forever? You're basically talking about solid state and solid state, DSP and DSP. If you're comfortable with your Strymon stuff, then you kind of got to be okay with this amp.
Exactly. And that's where people are really being unfair in this whole argument, because I've done videos on the Tone Masters and comparison videos. So I've probably done 3 videos total in the last couple of years. Yeah. And people will say, oh, they're disposable. Right. And like, well, so is your iPhone. Yeah. So are your Strymon. I mean, it's rare when you can repair. I had helped repair a Strymon pedal recently, and luckily it was just a pot, which still, it's hard to get to. It took 30 minutes to kind of carefully weave through it and not,
break something else trying to get
break something else, because it's delicate. Yep. And so that's the way, these amps are kind of a miracle of modern technology. Yep. And I think they should be enjoyed for what they are. And I think that the Tone Master, yes, but I haven't heard of anyone, I think they will still be repairable, or there will be something to replace the parts in it or something. I mean, maybe at some point they won't, warranty, offer any warranty repair on it at all. Maybe, I don't know. Right. But to me, the thing is, worst case scenario, man, it's a killer speaker cabinet. And I bet I could wire something else into there. Yeah. Or somebody could.
Well, and actually the chassis is exactly the same size as the tube one. And so is the cabinet. So you could just go ahead and order up the Mojo Tone kit and slide it in there, and you'd have a 65 reverb. Yeah.
And you're done.
There you go.
So so back to the brown or the blonde Tone Master. It's like, I have gigged with it. I have done shows, I've done my show with it where I've used it for a guitar sound.
My favorite story was when you did the gig and you took your 61 Vox?
64. Yeah.
64 Vox AC10. So this uber sweet, perfect stage volume situation. You're running it with your blonde Tone Master. You go on break, everybody's hyped up. You go back and everybody's thinking how great you sound, and you had totally forgotten to turn your Vox back on after the break.
Yeah.
And you're totally
because Vox amps, especially the old ones, they're really baking the tubes. And so if you take a 20-minute break, you turn the amp off. Sure. I mean, it's just kind of the smart thing to do. I mean, unless you're like running fans on it and stuff like that, but I wasn't. And it wasn't a cold room. And so I turned it off, because I'm trying to protect the amp so it doesn't just bake the insides. Yeah. And so all of a sudden it was one of those things where, the artist says, all of a sudden it's like, oh crap, we're supposed to be up there playing right now. So we run up there and start playing. And I didn't even, I didn't realize, because when I put the guitar on and I rolled the volume up, there was sound. I didn't even think about it.
Right. Yeah.
And it was even using the amp wasn't mic'd up. It was, it was just
IR out of the back, right?
Yeah. Just the IR out of the back.
The house guy was good.
Yeah. And no one said anything, and everything was like, oh yeah, sounded great. And then I realized at the end, I go over, you're tearing down, and all of a sudden you realize I didn't turn the AC10 back on.
I love that story.
Yeah.
I mean, that should be on a page in a magazine, for the Tone Master. They'd have to pay you a lot of money, but
I'd take it.
Well, I'm saying this so that when the guys over at Fender sees this, they'll call you right away. So, so the next one is actually the category that I have the absolute, I have no experience.
Yeah.
With either of the 68 reissues. So I apologize to the entire stream right now. So the only thing I know about the 68 Princeton is the many videos where I've seen Jim Capolongo playing one. Yeah. And he likes that he talked about how he liked that it broke up a little earlier. and that kind of fits my sense of. Well, of course, I should have said right out of the box. Now we're into a full tube amp. And the Silverface were a little bit hotter, a little more gained up. Not really. Really,
well,
the circuit's almost identical.
Yeah, they I don't know all the circuit differences on the 68 reissue versus the 65. I know that, you know, the biggest difference is, of course, you know, besides the cosmetic, is the fact that you have the you know, the Celestian, you know, speaker in there.
Okay.
And the speaker in there tends to kind of you know, have a little more aggression to it regardless. But yes, I agreed. When I've plugged into both the 68 and the 65, it seems like the 68 has a little less headroom, and I don't know exactly why that is.
I don't either. Yeah. So I apologize. I slid them in here at the last minute because I realized that I was missing them, and they are at the price point that's between the Tone Masters and the 65s. The 68 Princeton is listed at $12.99, and a 68 Deluxe is $14.99. One of the things I have to say as I went along here, and we should probably touch on it. It's already 4:25. Is that I'm surprised at how little a bump it is between the Princeton and the Deluxe, kind of re-emphasizing the fact that these are different animals, but not so much less. You know, the Princeton is not so much less than. This would probably be the time that we'd say, let's remind everybody that double the wattage is only 3 dB more volume. So you might immediately kind of go, well, you know, and clean headroom is a whole other conversation, probably a whole other stream. But the fact is, you've got 12 watts versus 22. Even if you just round everything off, you're talking about 3 dB more. Well, that's the difference between my talking voice now and my talking voice now.
Yeah,
that was probably more like 10 or 15 dB difference. So when you're talking about usable, and then and we're going to come back, but maybe we just do it right here. It's a good time to do it because I'm talking about volume. You said that you just used your Headstrong, which does have a 12-inch speaker, and the summary for you was, you said to me, was you don't want to do a gig where a Princeton doesn't cut it.
Yeah, a Princeton or a Deluxe. I really don't want to, like, I don't want to play with a hard hitting drummer anymore. I don't want to, you know, I like to be able to play without using hearing protection because I like to hear everything.
Yeah.
But unfortunately, you know, there's so many times where, you know, you're using in-ears or, you know, some guy decides that he really wants to, you know, beat the crap out of something. And so luckily I'm at the place where I don't have to take every gig that comes my way. And, but yeah, I've just gotten to the point where it's like, I don't want to play that loud. I mean, I played through 2 twin reverb amplifiers in the 90s, you know, both turned up to 5. I mean, that was loud.
Yeah.
And I had them at my feet, you know, and I had them pointing out in a V like this. So, and then I was here and they're pointing out this way.
If people want to see pictures of Zac, you can go back a month ago when I had him on and we were talking about his life in Telecasters. There's some photographic evidence of that twin reverb rig.
Of some bigger amps and stuff.
Bigger and silver, more silver.
Yeah. So I just got to where I wanted I wanted to have I don't want to play that loud anymore. I like subtlety. I like dynamics. Yeah. You can't play with dynamics when you've got a drummer that's beating the crap out of the skins and all that stuff. So so that was it. And the reason I wanted the Headstrong or a Princeton type amp in general was there were times where I was playing and I wanted the amp, the Deluxe, to have less headroom. And it wasn't so much I wanted a different sound. It was that I wanted it to hit kind of the sweet spot, because the sweet spot on a Fender amp is kind of at 4.5 or 5 as far as a clean sound. Mm-hmm. Now, if you want dirty, then you're talking about you need to turn it up higher. But it's like you want to have that little bit of grit, even when you're playing clean. You don't want it to be just crystal clean. I mean, even Wes Montgomery and Jimmy Bryant or all sorts of guys, you know, that you think of clean sounds from the 50s and 60s, there was always a bit of hair on it.
Yeah. And so harmonic content that it's adding. Yeah.
Yes.
Right.
So I've played through, and I've owned just a zillion Princeton amplifiers, vintage ones, silver face, black face, all sorts of stuff. And I would always end up getting rid of them because I never made kind of the jump to putting a 12 in there. And so it was, It was going over my buddy JD Simo. I went over to his studio.
I'm gonna stop you because
Okay.
we got to get through our list. But
Yes.
and frankly, that's where I'd like to end with you talking about your experience with the Headstrong, why you end up
Okay.
with Princeton out on the road. Because I think that these categories like portability and fullness and those kinds of things, that's all in there. So 68, I think we covered that. We didn't get down into scores, but does it go back to your initial statement of it doesn't sound like an original 68, but it's a totally usable tool?
I think it's a great sounding amp, and I think it's very giggable, very usable. I think it's a great amp, and it does sound more like an old amp than like the Tone Master Princeton does.
Yeah.
So,
okay. There you go. We are dealing with tubes, and then you can swap out tubes, and you can really hit a lot of different things. So,
and just a quick aside on the Tone Master thing. I think just the portability and the lack of tubes and the fact that it sounds good and it's easy to use. That's one reason why I recommend it a lot to people, because it's like owning tube amps. It's problematic. I mean, there's a whole level of maintenance and and time and money that's consumed in keeping these things running properly.
Yeah.
Whether it's me doing it myself, because it's like, all of a sudden you've got like a microphonic tube and you've got to, find it and fix it before you film something or go play a gig.
Yeah.
So anyway.
Tim Lurch is in the stream, everybody. Mr. Lurch is here. He says, for me, Princeton in the studio and a deluxe, if necessary, live. I happen to know that Bill Frisell's rider calls for a deluxe. But when he's in town at home, he's actually using a Headstrong Princeton size amp, is what I hear.
Yep.
So see, we're touching on all the cool kids here.
And Tim is a very cool kid.
In the stream that everybody seems to be talking among themselves, and so we're only as we knew, we're only mildly interesting. We're an excuse for the 5-watt world folks to gather. And that's what I'm good with that. I'm a backdrop kind of guy. We're basically playing a gig in the background. That's what.
Yeah, and they're having a good time, and we're
and that's all that matters.
Yeah. Da, 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 da.
All right, so 65 Princeton reissues are $13.99. Again, we're dealing with a 12-watt tube amp. I didn't cover weight, but the 68 and the 65s are the same weight. The Princetons are 34 pounds, and the Deluxes are 42 pounds. So basically, with all that tube trouble, you're also doubling the weight of the Tone Master to a tube version of a Deluxe. And then stage volume. Now we're into tube amps, like with the Silver Face, you don't have an IR output anymore.
Nope.
So now you've got to really, now you're at the mercy of the sound guy. And if you don't have your own, you're really at the mercy of the house sound guy.
Yeah.
This is where Princeton, if you bring your own sound and you've got your own guy, then I kind of am squeaking towards Deluxe.
Absolutely. I agree with you 1,000%. Okay. So, I mean, it's like, if I'm going to, again, we're going to talk more about this later, but it's like, I'm not going to take a Princeton if, in a situation where I think I'm going to get overwhelmed by the other instruments.
There you go.
And I'm going to take a Princeton when I know that my amp's going to be mic'd up and there's going to be a good, front of house guy, monitor engineer. There's going to be in-ears or something of that sort. Or I know the drummer and he's going to have a cocktail kit or some type of normal size kit, and he's not going to beat the crap out of the drums and trying to prove how hard he can play.
Yeah. You know what? I realized we're at 4:34. Let me do my spot for Artist Works, and I want to check your memory. Let's check my memory of your background on this.
Yeah.
About 10 years ago, I discovered Artist Works and signed up for the electric country guitar with Guthrie Trapp. Do I remember that you took his course on Artist Works as well?
I did. Yeah. I really enjoyed it.
We both kind of discovered, we didn't even know each other then, but we both discovered Guthrie's course on Artist Works. And at the time, Artist Works was not owned within the group that is True Fire. And there's a couple other companies that I can't do because we're live. But I'll tell you that his much more arpeggiated sort of approach to country guitar, but also just it changed the way I approached the instrument completely, to the point when I finally got around to like Jeff Macrolane's arpeggio courses, or back to Tim Lurch playing arpeggios or sketching chords and stuff. It was like, frankly, I was still hearing, Guthrie's South Louisiana voice talking to me about the original from the original course. That's where he's from. Yes.
Yes. I mean, he's from
Southern Alabama.
Yes, Southern Alabama, near. He's from the where Alabama hits Florida, the Florabama area.
Yeah, the Florabama area.
Yeah, you're obviously not
jokes about folks like that. No.
Yeah,
Not in front
of them. You make jokes about them behind their back, not in front of them. You don't make jokes about
they're tough. Anyway, we're going to see if we can get Guthrie on the show. Anyway, Artist Works has affordable courses in a wide variety of instruments and styles, all with master level musicians ready to work with you using their innovative video exchange program. My twice a month acoustic jam, my mandolin player is venturing out on fiddle now. And he kind of said to me, hey, don't you have a mandolin? So it's time for me to take some mandolin lessons. So I'll be looking at Artist Works for that, but also back to Truthfire because there's some mandolins there. But I mean, Mike Marshall is on Artist Works. Yeah. Mike Marshall, he played with David Grissman. I noticed that Sierra Hull is doing lessons on Artist Works now. I mean, some of the top bluegrass players and these instruments and acoustic, really, really deep in the acoustic side of the house. There's a 40% discount in Artist Works schools using the link in the description along with the code FWW40. So if you use the link in the description and the FWW40, then I'll get credit that I sent you there. And that's a good thing for sponsorships. Taking courses with Artist Works definitely opened up the way I play, and it can do the same for you. I'd like to thank Artist Works for their support. I'm thrilled to be working with both of the companies now, and that's why you're seeing it alternate on my videos, as I'm going to do every other one, Truefire and Artist Works. And a bunch of people came on and said, whoa, no Truefire anymore? Like someone offered you more money? I'm like, no, money's the same. It's just a different company, and they're a different approach. So everybody needs something different. Anyway, that's Artist Works. That's my plug. So, okay. So we were on 65 reissues. These have been around since when, Zach?
Early 90s.
I was going to say, frankly, my memory is that the 65 reissue, and I saw a couple of questions in here about where's the Hot Rod series along with this? Like, where's a Blues Junior in this world? And that would be a other thing. But that series of amps isn't based on, in any way, the original circuits from the pre-CBS days and mid-CBS days.
Right.
So that's a different animal altogether. But they came out about the same time. I bought a pair of Hot Rod Deluxes in 1994 as my uber clean amp to play on a jazz gig.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
they're great solid amps.
Yeah. Oh, they absolutely are. And and it's the back line everywhere in the world. The Hot Rod Deluxe is actually the #1 selling Fender amp of all time.
I believe it.
They have sold more Hot Rod Deluxes than anything else.
I've gigged with them before. They're great. Yeah. And I've used the Hot Rod DeVille's, like the 410. That's my favorite. Like if you're going to do a fly date, and that's probably the amp that I would request would be the 410 DeVille.
When Jeff plays the bitter end in New York, he takes his 2-Rock Studio, the little signature one, the small head, and he plugs it into the back of the House DeVille that they have there as his speaker cabinet.
Yeah.
He's like, what's better than, and I guess right. Robin Ford does a very similar kind of treatment. Ford always asks for a super reverb and a DeVille to fill in those gaps, because they definitely do the same kind of idea. So let's get back to the program here, though. So 65 reissue, again, to go back to what you said before. What year is your original Deluxe?
It's a 65.
No kidding. Okay.
Like October of 1965. Yeah.
So the new one sounds just like yours, right?
No, but it's very usable and good. And that's the thing. I mean, it's hard when you have an amp that was made by a different company. Right. And you have layers of different ownership between. You have 2 layers of different ownership between the company that made that amp, or at least one. And and it's just, you don't have the same parts being made and the same caps and all sorts of things. And so, but I think the 65 reissues it's a really solid, great amp. I've done a lot of gigs with a 65 reissue. I think it's a great amp. I think, you're
talking about the Deluxe.
Yeah, the Deluxe. Yeah. And the Princeton. I mean, I think I've gigged with that too, and it was great. I mean, I didn't have any problems with either one of them. Yeah, I think both of them, on the Deluxe, of course, my personal pet peeve is to clip the bright cap,
Right.
which you can't. But the way you defeat it is, when you can't clip it, is basically you need to be able to turn the amp up to 5, and that kind of defeats it.
To sort of bring the EQ where it belongs.
Right.
To get it, get the mid range's attention.
Right.
Yeah, and then the next thing, probably even before that, you'd be right there changing out the speaker with your little
but you can't do
that in the back.
Yeah, exactly. I'll ship my own speaker and
carrying a Celestion in your gig bag.
Right. Yeah. Here's my vintage 30 or whatever. But yeah, those amps are really solid, and they're great. They're very, very usable. Yeah.
So what would you give a score? Where we kind of with scores on these?
Okay. Obviously on the on the 65 Princeton.
Yeah. Stage volume.
Yeah. Stage volume, it's probably like a 4, because it just,
Home volume is, we didn't spend a lot of time talking about it, but I actually find the Tone Master stuff much more home friendly than the tube stuff. There's no master volumes. So when people ask me about my favorite little tube amp for at home, I always say, also because of price, the Vox AC10 C1, because it's got a master volume and they sound great. Yeah, they sound great at home.
Yeah, so that's one of the things about the Tone Masters as far as home use is that they have a consistent sound. And so whether you have it like at 1, and again, we're not talking about using the attenuator and stuff, but let's say you don't have that in effect at all, but you're just using the volume control, it has a consistent sound. If you have a real tube amp, well, it sounds different on 2 versus 3. Yeah. And it's just, and so I've had, guys that say, I've got a Deluxe reverb amp and I can't turn it up loud enough at home. And it's like,
I can't turn it up loud enough to get the sound I want at home.
Right.
Is what you mean. Yeah.
I
totally agree. Yeah. So home volume is probably more like a 2 or 3.
On which?
On the Princeton? Yeah.
Yeah, it's probably out of 5, I'd give it a 3. Yeah.
Okay. Portability. This is a 34-pound Princeton now.
You got to give it a 4.
Okay. More portable than your Deluxe. Fullness of tone. This is my like smaller cabinet problem. How about you? Same thing? 10-inch
Same thing. And it has more to do with the speaker than anything else.
And we're back to what's your favorite 10-inch. And somebody asked because they'd missed it. You said you like the 10-inch greenback.
Yes, the Celestion 10-inch greenback. I think it's a really, really great
3?
speaker. Yeah, I'd give it a 3.
Okay. And then feel.
I think it has a good feel. I'd give it a 4. Yeah.
I agree. I'm right there with you. And then a 65 Deluxe stage volume.
I mean, I'll give it a 5. I mean, it has plenty.
Any gig you want to be on, it does the job, right?
Yeah, it'll do it for me.
And home volume is where the challenge is.
Yes, that's because of the bright cap that's on there, and unless you clip it, then it's like it sounds pretty thin in that 1 to 3 range on the volume control. So I'm gonna give it like a 2.
Okay.
Because that's the way the amp's made.
Portability.
I'd give it like a 2 or 3.
We'll go generous. Fullness. See, now for me, the big difference between the Tone Masters moving up to a Deluxe, when I say to people, if you have the space, just buy the Deluxe and stick it in a corner, and it's just going to be that much more full. There's no way around it. You don't have to futz with the 12-inch speaker. It's already there. I used to leave mine permanently at 12.5 on the attenuator and just used them that way the whole time I owned them. And I would own them again. Everybody, I just try not to have, too much stuff. And I'm not very successful at it. So, yeah.
There's, a bigger speaker and a bigger cabinet is just going to sound fuller no matter what. I mean, it's just kind of the way it is. It's
fullness and feel is a 5 in both. Yes.
Yeah.
Okay. So this last category is the hand wired 64 Princeton is $2,799. And the Deluxe is $2,999. Now, I've owned a 64 hand wired Deluxe. You had a 64 Princeton at one time. Have you had the Deluxe?
I've played through one, but I have not owned the 64 hand wired Deluxe. I owned the 64 hand wired Princeton for a while.
Okay. So I would assume that stage volume, et cetera, these scores are going to be the same as the 65 reissues in general, maybe with a
Yeah.
slightly fuller sound, I did hear a difference. And I'll give my one grumble about the deluxe here in a second. But
Yeah.
what was your sense of the 64 hand wired versus a 65 reissue?
It was a little fuller sounding, and what it had to do with part of it was just that it had a P10R instead of a C10R.
Oh,
So it had
it
an
had a better
Alnico.
speaker.
Yeah, it had and I'm not a fan of that speaker either, really, but I like it better than the C10R.
Okay.
And it just had, it had a little more mid, a little more fullness, and it had a touch of compression to it, so that it felt a little better.
Nicer, more fun to play. Yeah.
And here's my critical part. It's that the hand wired amps, you're paying a lot more.
Yeah.
You're paying a lot more because of the amount of handiwork that's done.
And I'm kind of rushing through this part because I want to get to the fact that you can buy hand built amps for substantially less than this number that are very, very good. And I'm going to talk about having built some of my own, and I've run out of time to talk about yours. And it's, we're doing well if we kind of zip through these. I'll just throw the Deluxe 64 Deluxe has both channels wired so that you can have reverb and tremolo on both channels.
Right.
To do that, it requires a change in the circuit that I don't understand, but my friend Dan Lurie at FYD explained to me. He said and those amps actually have a reputation for being noisy. And for that reason, Dan reassured me and told me that if I had brought I don't have that amp anymore, but he told me that if I brought that to him, he said he could make it shut up completely. And he said it really just has to do with the quality of parts used in the critical points in the circuit where those things are being blended back together, and those kinds of things. He's like, it's not hard to make that amp sound like it cost $3,000, because he thought out of the box it didn't so much.
Yeah.
Which is a segue for me to say that I built a pair of single channel deluxes in Princeton cabs with 12-inch speakers under Dan's tutelage in a fantasy Eric Johnson moment idea that I had to have two matching. They were great amps that Dan designed, and they basically were black panel, single channel black panel, no tremolo, deluxe reverb channels. And if people don't know it, the big difference between a Princeton and a Deluxe has to do with the specifics. And I can't do it here. I don't know if you can, Zach. There's specifics about the phase inverter circuit that actually give a Deluxe much more headroom. But once you get to the Deluxe, the preamp circuit is the same in the Fender amps going up, from 65 on. The preamp is the same. So you're basically just changing the power amp section right all the way to the phase inverter. It's the same circuit.
Yeah, it's the big difference between the Princeton reverb and the Deluxe reverb is the transformers and the phase inverter, and then of course speakers and stuff. But that's the big, it's just that you have a smaller transformer, it can't handle it. And
yeah, absolutely. Although bizarrely, I have an original reissue output transformer for my GA40. It's the size of a walnut. It's this little thing, and the amp is so loud. So I don't know what it is. That's the Gibson circuits are a whole other level of mysticism. That it's not RCA tube book kind of stuff. Seth Lover designed a lot of that stuff. So, I think that's the summary of the Deluxe, the 64 hand wired stuff. So that's the segue to what kind of led to us sitting here today, which is you now tell your story about going over to JD's and checking out the amp that he's carrying. And this is a guy that at one time was touring with a Marshall and a 412.
Yeah,
and then he came to a Deluxe. And that's a great story. If you find, there's a video where he talks about showing up for the load in with his Deluxe again after playing a Deluxe, a Telly into a Deluxe at Roberts, for 4 years or something. Put it away. Did the whole Marshall stack. He even says, a rig of his heroes, and then he went back.
Yeah.
So
I was wanting to get, there is a difference in tone between a Princeton and a Deluxe, and the difference in tone I feel is that the Princeton has a little bit more mid-range to its sound. To me, the Deluxe Reverb has a little bit of a scoop, you know, as far as the difference between those two amps.
More
and then, of course, you have the whole headroom difference and the phase inverted, all those things.
Right.
But what I wanted was, I wanted something that sounded like my Deluxe, but it had a little less headroom, and I could get it to the sweet spot at a lower volume. That's what I was wanting.
And really, for you, this is lower stage volume.
Right, lower stage volume.
Okay.
So I, you know, was going through the Princeton thing again, and I ended up with, you know, one of the hand wired 64 amps, and it wasn't a bad amp. It was that it was such an expensive amp, and then it was like, you know, and I had done some trading to get it. You know, I did not get it from Fender.
Right.
I got it on my own, you know, doing some trading, and I felt like the amp was so expensive, and it was like this hand wired, and it's a Fender, and I felt like, why am I jacking with this thing? And
why am I parking this big pile of money in this thing?
Right. And then I'm going to put more money into it as I, you know, think about putting a 12 in it or all this other stuff. And so I just kind of thought, you know, this is not working. So then I had the amp. I went over to JD's. JD has this Headstrong amp, and it's just a dead nuts, you know, 64 Princeton, you know, copy. No upgrades, no changes to the transformers, no changes to the phase inverter.
No changes to the transformers.
No changes at all. Now he offers amps that Headstrong offers upgraded ones. So that's, I know that gets confusing.
Well, and I should have said before, because I went right off into phase inverters, but I'll remind everybody, but both of these amps, Zach's absolutely right to point out the transformers, because both of these amps are running a pair of 6v6s. So it's how much energy you're giving the 6v6s is affecting the volume, the wattage that the amps can produce. Yeah.
So I, you know, at JD's studio, he had this amp, and the only thing that's different on it is it's got a 12. And so, you know, same size cabinet. It just has a different, you know, it has a different cutout on the baffle board. It's got the Eminence Alessandro GA64 ceramic speaker, which is like $120 speaker. It's nothing, you know, it's nothing fancy, but it was just, as soon as I plugged it in, because I had my telly with me, and I plugged in, and it was like, I was like, that's it. That's what I've been, you know, looking for. And so I just immediately, you know, called up, you know, Headstrong, and I just, you know, ordered one up, and you know, he has a little bit of a wait, and so it was like a couple weeks, you know, maybe 6 weeks or something like that. It showed up, and I told him, I said, you know, I'd really like to take this on a gig I've got coming up. And I said, can you have it done before this date? And he did. And it was literally just, you know, he got it in just the day before. And so I got it, and then, you know, had a chance to make sure everything was healthy, you know, because that's always kind of a concern when you get something new, you know, that just came in the mail. So I kind of did some burn in with it and played through it, and it didn't have any microphonic tubes, didn't have any tube rattle, didn't have any of that stuff going on, which was
didn't you say that he even shipped it with the rubber tube grommets on it to sort of keep down everything?
So, and it was, and I have to say, this is kind of a funny thing to say, and I think I said it in my video, but it was, I've never seen an amp that was packed better, ever.
Oh, right.
You know, I mean, he packed the amp like he was shipping me a Dumble. And it's a great amp. And so I was just amazed, you know, because I got it, and I was really glad I took it, because we ended up having very little room in the vehicle, where we just had enough.
I was going to ask you this. I mean, we got like 6 or 7 minutes, but we can run over. But I was really, you said that in the video when you were talking about it, and I'm like, okay, so Princeton is 16 inches wide, and a Deluxe is 24 inches wide, 8 inches wide, 2 inches shorter. But you know, the fact that my thing is, like, I have a little car, my Princeton will go behind the seat. That's it. Like, it'll sit in the well behind the seat and not slosh around and stuff. The Deluxe, I'd have had to stick it up on end, and it still might not have fit.
So if I would have taken the Deluxe, I would have had to taken it, you know, in the cab of the, you know,
had it under your feet the whole way to Tulsa.
I would have had it under my feet. And so as it was, So, but then, we showed up, we're using in-ear monitors. We have our own, monitor rig, and, they're good, and we're playing some good venues. And, I turned it up to 4.5, 5. It was the perfect sweet spot to where if I hit a boost pedal, it would get a little hair on it, especially if I romp on the low strings a little bit.
Yep.
And so it sounded stellar. And I was just so happy to, get something that, was easier to carry around, hit the sweet spot at a lower volume, and just, sounded really good. And it was the problem with, carrying around a 1965 Deluxe reverb amplifier. It's like, now it's getting to be a $4,000 amp.
Right.
It's like, I thought it was ridiculous when they got to be a $2,500 amp, and then it became but now it's like, and then people are asking, $4,500, $5,000. And it's like, and, most of the time I take my old Esquire too, and you start feeling like, dude, I've got, a crazy amount of
track of here. Yeah.
Yes. And it's like, I can't keep my hands on everything. And already I have my Esquire, and I'm taking it, I don't leave it anywhere.
Yeah.
And so then it's like, it's like if you all of a sudden then you decided to add 2 clones to your pedal board. So then you've got a $7,000 pedal board.
I didn't go there. I didn't go to the clon pedal board thing.
So So anyway, so that was.
So do you know what yours weighs? What the Headstrong weighs? It's got to be pretty similar to like a standard Princeton.
Yeah, it weighs, close to the same amount. It's just got, of course, got a 12 in there. So I'm sure that's adding probably 2 or 3 pounds. So it's probably 2 or 3 pounds heavier.
Yeah, 34, 35 pounds.
Yeah.
Yeah, but it's just amazing how much easier it is to schlep around just because of the less bulk.
Right. Yeah. Less bulk. And and it's just nice to be able to, kind of fit it around depending on, whether you're on a big stage or a little stage. And the other thing I did is I get the amp off the floor. And so I do that because, one, I don't want to, couple with the floor too much, because you've got, when you're playing bigger venues, you've got subs.
Right.
And so those subs really generate a lot of this weird low end and it's coming up into the amp, and then it's getting picked up by the microphone. So by getting the amp off the floor and miking it,
do you carry something to get it off the floor?
Yeah. I have it's an old it's a Coke it's an old Coke crate.
So you carry your clothes in that, and then you use it to get the amp off the floor.
No, you want me to grab it? It's right here.
I want to see it now.
Okay.
Everybody's been really good, but I have tried to. Steve Moore says Headstrong shows their weight as 32 pounds. I'd see that's just what I thought you were talking about. So what's in there?
So I just keep my GAC in there. So I've got like a
GAC. Your GAC. What is GAC?
Cables, extension cords.
Okay.
And so I have it upside, so I have it like this to carry stuff in, and then I get all the stuff out and I flip it over. Also, it has my backup amp rig, which is a radial, JDI and Iridium. So that's my emergency, because I didn't have room to take a backup amp, because normally I would have a second amp.
Yeah.
But this way, I could quickly undo the XLR from the microphone, and I move it over to this, and then I plug the Iridium at the end of my chain and plug it in.
And the radial's passive. You're not even powering it, right?
Right.
Yeah. I know that box. Yeah.
So that's my emergency backup rig, and I love that the Coke thing says Jackson, Tennessee, because that's the home of that was the home of Carl Perkins.
Oh, okay. See, that's good mojo.
It is. It's real good mojo, because it makes me think about.
I should have stole a crate like that when I was in Nashville. I told you I missed my opportunity. They probably don't even have anything like that anymore.
Yeah, well, if they do, it's like 100. I actually wanted a wooden crate, because I wanted to be cool and have a wooden crate. But people want way too much money for actual old ones. They want
were able to buy that. You didn't have to go up behind some nice mom and pop diner and steal it, huh?
I would have stolen it. I'm not above stealing, but I think my wife, on a mission of love, she bought it for me. I think for $10 to $20.
The same woman that took you to New Orleans to the Jazz and Blues Festival for your birthday.
That's right. She's a saint.
For your tiny little 50th birthday, because you're crying and everything. And
I was like, oh, I didn't get anything for my birthday. And,
Okay. It's 5 o'clock, boys and girls.
Yeah.
So everybody seemed to have a good time talking among themselves. I hope there was something that went by. Jake Stewart says JD and Capolongo are why I started playing straight into the amp with a cranked car Rambler. A cranked car Rambler is a 40-watt amp, Jake.
Yeah.
That's a man-sized tone you got going there.
Yeah, that's good.
Yeah. Paul Torbert says JHS shirt on Zach. No. That is an Ask Zach, vintage shirt. Yeah. The other side. Yeah, there you go.
And you can get it at askzach.com.
It's good. I almost bought a car from you. Wait, your dad used to sell cars. You know how to do that voice, right?
Oh yeah.
Yeah. So
what is it
earlier
for me to put?
I didn't spend time on it. People were commenting on the way you say reverb.
Yeah.
Is that a Southern thing? Robin Ford says it the same way. Larry Carlton says it the same way.
It's a Texas thing, and also it's like if I have too many Topo Chicos, because I love my Topo Chico
stuff. That's basically corn syrup and water.
No, it has no sugar at all.
Really?
It's just carbonated. It's just It's just mineral.
Okay. All right. Okay.
Yeah, I don't really do sugar.
All right.
If I have enough Topo Chico, I'll start saying guitar instead of guitar.
You go full Texas.
Yeah, and that's just that's what I grew up with, and it's like when you go into Clausen's music in Corpus Christi, Texas, and Bubba Clausen starts telling you you're looking for a guitar,
Guitar.
Yeah.
There we go.
Guitar. Yeah.
There we go.
I am Bubba. I'm looking for a guitar.
Yeah. Christopher Butler reminds us that reverb oration is the word. So reverb must be the correct short version of it. Somebody else said deluxe with cheese. Nelson Rodriguez says deluxe with cheese. I think that sounds like a stream ender if I ever heard one. I'll take a deluxe with cheese.
Yes.
Or a hand-built Princeton, come to find out, with a 12.
Yeah.
Yeah. Nice. Zach, always so much fun for me when you're willing to come on the show again.
Well, I just appreciate the big check that you're signing and going to put in my account. Oh, golly.
Everybody understands how funny that is.
A lot of gambling debts and a lot of other things that I've done wrong, so thank you for having me, Keith.
Oh, my pleasure. Absolutely my pleasure. The music at the beginning wasn't either of us playing, and I went on the company that I use for downloads and just found something that had too much reverb. And that's what I used. And reverb is the theme of the day. I'm going to use that same clip to play us out. Again, thanks. And everybody remember that this was an ArtistWorks stream today, really. So we use the link for ArtistWorks in the description, and the discount code is FWW40. Until next time, this is Keith Williams. Thanks for being a part of the 5-watt world. And see you next time.
Are you still there? Are you going to come back and talk to me?